There's a lot of diversity in our expression of our humanity that is beautiful to God and valuable to Him.
Right. And we would be so naive to not recognize that, gender and representing your gender is such a hot topic today. Right. And
Yes.
I wonder if it would just ease up all of the pressure if we could just allow for there being such diversity within these genders.
Yes.
One of my favorite parts of that sermon that I listened to that Jimmy did was like him at the end, he was talking about, you know what? I am like, I'm a guy, but what did he say? His favorite singer is Whitney Houston.
Oh,
Because
yeah. His
he's
friends are
like,
out playing basketball when he's a kid, and he's like, I'm going to go listen to your mom's Whitney Houston album inside because I'd rather do that. He grew up in theater and he had a Barbie as a kid, and he just was not a traditional boy, but he was still a boy,
yeah.
still a man. And his parents did a great job in valuing his own unique expression of that. But yeah, his point in that sermon, I think it's really important, is that the culture's view of gender is actually far more narrower than God's view of gender. That God sees men and women as distinct, but the way that we express manhood and womanhood is very vast. But yet, if in our culture you tend to prefer things maybe like my husband did, right? I don't want to play sports. I want to listen to great singers. The culture may say that's kind of feminine. Maybe you're actually a woman. So the view of manhood and womanhood is actually very narrow, which is why we see so much pushing to switch back and forth. Maybe is we have these tight, narrow boxes for them, where the scriptures really give us, no, your biological body matters. And you need to be true to that. But within that biological body, the bounds are pretty broad for how you might want to express that. And you see that in men and women in the scriptures. There are some things that we need to preserve, but there's a lot of beautiful variety in the expression of that's valuable. And I know plenty of men who, and in marriages, who the man is the more sensitive one than the woman, which doesn't mean he's no less a man and she's no less a woman. It's just they tend to express their manhood and womanhood, maybe not in the way that most people do. And the Bible would say, yes, that's great. Exactly how God made you. You're still man and a woman. But we do have to be wary. Our culture would maybe say something different because their view of gender is actually more narrow, surprisingly.
That is such a great point. I don't think I've ever heard it put quite like that. That narrowing is really, and so if the culture puts such a narrow view on gender, well, of course, then there's a response of, I want to be free from this narrow grid. I'm not like that. Don't put me in this narrow, box. So, Kelly, talk about that. Let's, we're gonna maybe circle back and talk about other false narratives, but what false narrative of the world does this part of our Bible correct? The part that says male and female, he created them.
Well, I think the big thing, the big thing that it's confronting in these verses is that biological gender matters immensely, that it is very important to God. Whether you were created biologically male or female is a part of God's self-portrait to the world and a portraying of him to the world. And so to reject that is to say, my role as an image bearer, I don't want it, and I'm going to reverse it. And I'm going to mask the very thing that God has said is a part of showcasing him to the world. That's a big deal. So biological gender matters a lot to God. Now, does that mean if I have a daughter and she's born biologically female, but she doesn't want to wear dresses and pink, she wants to play soccer and wear shorts and baseball hats, that I need to say, no, you can't do that. You are a girl and you need to wear girly things because that's how we honor God. I don't think it means that. I think it's okay for a girl to be a tomboy, as we might call them, right? But she still should know, I am a girl. I am female. God made me a girl, and it is good for me to preserve that, celebrate it, see it as valuable and good. And I'm a girl who wants to play sports. Awesome. And if you have a son who is the same way, he wants to be in musical theater like my husband did, and he wants to dress up and do pretend and do all these things, we don't need to dampen that. But we do need to advocate for the fact that you were born a boy matters a lot to God.
Mm.
And it is important and valuable and lovely and good. And a preserving of that is important. So that's something that we're seeing culturally happen, is a trying to dismiss biological gender as unimportant, as this tiny little fact. Well, you're biologically male or female, but what are you really on the inside? And that is a problem. Maybe the world, what they're trying to say is, I want to express that this way, and they feel like the box is too narrow, right? But to dismiss biological gender is a huge affront to God and how we were made and what our function is as image bearers. And we need to deal with that. That's, I think, the biggest thing that this passage is confronting. How the biological gender you're given at birth is important for you to embrace, celebrate, and take part in.
And, so much pressure that we put on ourselves when we set out to decide our own gender, like kids trying to figure out, well, I'm not sure exactly who I am on the inside, rather than like, I just love that, how the clarity of male and female, he created them. Male or female, he created you, right? You don't have to be the creator in the story. There already is a creator. And I just love the freedom that you're inviting us to, Kelly, with just this opening of, like, you don't have to look like these other people. You don't have to play the same sports. You don't have to be, you do not, there is no mold for you, because you are uniquely gifted and created by God. So go ahead and express who you uniquely are, but do that within the gender that God has assigned for you. There's so much freedom in that. It seems not freeing, like the world would say, no, that's not freedom. Freedom is I get to be whoever I want to be. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, true. I'm going to actually reference something Elizabeth Elliot said in a book called Let Me Be a Woman, because it's such a great analogy in what true freedom is. That she talked about a sailboat, that the sailboat that's meant to be on the water with the wind behind it, that could we choose to put it on the sand and say, I don't want to go on the water, I want to go on the sand? You could. And say, I'm free to do that. I'm free to not be a boat on the water. I can be on the land. But that's going to be really frustrating and actually really restraining, because that boat was not created to make any movement whatsoever in sand and on ground. The wind is not going to help it move. It's going to fall over, and it's actually going to restrain it. But to put the boat where it was created to be, on the water, is actually true freedom, because then all the ways that it was created can now flourish and thrive, and it can move all over the place, because that was its function. That was how it was created. And so to embrace the way that we were made, and live within the bounds of which we were made, is actually the truest form of freedom we will ever experience. Sure, can we rebel against that? We can. You can call it freedom, but functionally, it's not actually freedom. It's captivity, and it's actually hindering us from real life and real flourishing.
So good.